Welcome to Musical Minds and Missions, M Cubed. I'm your host, Sarah Cahill. M Cubed is brought to you by Phenotypic Recordings, a media company that brings to light new music by world-class musicians and innovative composers, with a focus on music that highlights the most important issues facing the world in our time. Today, I'm talking with composer Osvaldo Golijov, violinist and violist Barry Shiffman, and pianist, producer, and Phenotypic Recordings artistic director Stephen Prutsman. Osvaldo, let's talk about your inspiration for this work and what motivated you to write it.
Yeah, it is mostly a work that explores friendship, right? Primarily, I think it's the friendship between Geoff Nuttall and I, and then I think that the beautiful thing is to share this music. What we did in the record was to have Stephen Prutsman and Barry Shiffman, who also, I mean, Barry actually knows Geoff from way before I do. I mean, you guys know each other from when you are in your early teens or even before, right? And Stephen, I think a little before I met Geoff, you already met him, right? In the early 90s, maybe?
Yeah, I was trying to piece it together. Early 90s. Then it all came together.
Yeah, so that's more or less the same time as I met Barry and Geoff. And, and I think all music is a conversation, but the cliche, which is also true, is that especially chamber music is a conversation, right? In this particular case, by the piece was sort of the last, the specific piece over yours was the last conversation about music that Geoff and I had. I mean, and by conversation, I mean not necessarily in words, right? But other words are part of it. But doing the record after Geoff is gone, I think adds a new dimension. It is the beauty of the continuation of that conversation, right? Because the piece in itself, I think, is, yes, it is based on Haydn, because Geoff loved Haydn, but it's mostly the way in which Geoff played Haydn. You know, it is filtered through his gesturality, right? And we knew him so well that like to have Stephen produce the record means that he knew those qualities as well. He knew this is the spirit of Geoff, and this is not so much. And I have to say that it was very moving to work with two quartets that didn't know Geoff. I mean, Daniel, the leader of the Arethusa, saw him and spoke briefly once. But what I'm trying to say is that thanks to music, life continues in some way forever, right? As long as the music is played again.
Yeah. We should say Geoff Nuttall was violinist in the St. Lawrence String Quartet and died in 2022. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Barry, you were a longtime member of the St. Lawrence String Quartet as well. And so you all knew each other for decades now. Yeah, Barry, can you talk about your relationship with Osvaldo over the years?
Sure. So, the St. Lawrence Quartet, when we were together and just in the early years of our start, I won't even say career because we didn't have a career, but in the early years of playing together, we formed in '89, and in 92, 93, 94, those years, we ended up at Tanglewood on the invitation of
Gil
Gil
Kalish.
Kalish, yeah, and that whole crew. And part of being at Tanglewood was that you were required to play a work that was being written for you by a composer in residence that they chose, and they chose Osvaldo. And we were at Tanglewood, excited to play Beethoven and excited to play Bartok and Berg for some of the old faculty like Eugene Lehner and Louis Krasner that knew those great composers. And the Osvaldo project was this kind of extra addendum that was required and not terribly well loved by the quartet. We were like, who is this guy and why do we have to learn this new piece when there's all this great music that we can go study with these guys that knew the composer? We completely missed the point of seeing the connection from Louis Krasner having played the premiere of Berg's works, and I think we missed that Tanglewood was creating that same opportunity for us with Osvaldo. We were like, yeah, but who is this guy? And so we're learning this piece, and like a lot of new music, it's a new language for us, and we did not understand it, and we couldn't really make it come off of the page. And then we got to meet Ozzy, and and we were quite inspired by Geoff, where he's very passionately trying to figure out what this piece is, and the St. Lawrence Quartet rehearsal style. I'm not sure to say can say it was a style. It probably resembled a bit of the Trump White House in terms of the lack of decorum. Um, so so poor Ozzy comes into this session, and we're just like, what does this mean? And like that sounds terrible, and we cannot. And he just very calmly started to sing this piece,
What
and
was the piece?
that piece was a Yiddishbbuk, a piece for string quartet, and we were all enthralled by the clarity of vision that Osvaldo had around what the piece could sound like, and that transformed our whole approach. And Geoff led the charge, throwing himself into this, and by the end of the week working together, Ozzy was one of the St. Lawrence Quartet. We were his brothers, and it just went from there. So I have to say that in choosing the quartets, I didn't know the Arethusa, and I will be honest and say I was pretty skeptical about anybody recording music that was written for Geoff so closely after we'd lost him. And then I met Daniel Rowland, and he's I mean, I don't think there's another Geoff, but they are cut from a similar cloth. There's a
I
kind
think
of
so, yeah.
embrace of vulnerability in their playing and risk, and I think they had a similar, Daniel has a similar buy-in to what's important in what we do, and not to say he's not a perfectionist, but that wasn't the goal. The goal was not to play perfectly. The goal was to play something utterly emotion-filled and personal, and so for me, getting to meet him, I felt close again to Geoff in getting to make music with Daniel, for sure.
And a lot of us first sort of knew about Osvaldo Golijov from that album that you made of Yiddishbbuk and the Dreams and Prayers of Isaac the Blind, and that's on EMI, right? I mean, that's how a lot of people became familiar with Osvaldo Golijov's music.
Yeah, we were look. I think we as a quartet and Osvaldo were lucky. All the stars aligned. We were at Tanglewood, and the performance of Osvaldo's piece was part of an entire evening of new music where a bunch of new pieces were presented. And unbeknownst to the St. Lawrence Quartet, in the audience was Kronos, because they were performing at Tanglewood that week, and a bunch of other people. Kronos immediately loved the piece. They took Yiddishbbuk into their active repertoire, played it maybe 100 times. Word spread. The Cleveland Quartet commissioned Osvaldo to write Dreams and Prayers. And from that one night, I don't think I've ever seen that repeated, where everything just lined up perfectly, and the right people heard the piece. And the next day after the premiere, you know, the New York Times had a photo of the St. Lawrence Quartet on the front page, not the entertainment center. And it's like, what? This never happens. Like it was just an incredible confluence of, you know, opportunity that came together that night for all of us.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Steve, how did you meet Osvaldo and the St. Lawrence Quartet?
I think the St. Lawrence came first, Barry. I mean, I was in Vancouver. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm
So,
pretty sure it's 91, maybe 92 in
yeah, in
Vancouver,
my
93.
piano playing days, I would, you know, we'd do go to these different chamber music festivals in the summertime, and that must have been the first place. My first memories of Geoff, though, was that kind of the classical music bad boy bit, you know, with the way he would dress and walk and his love of motorcycles and, you know, sports and, you know, and the way he would also talk and give feedback, which was really blunt, straight to it, you know, that's horrible, you know, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but it took a while to like, also in the beginning, he was careful about friendship. He wasn't the kind of the immediately effusive, you know, let's hug, be besties. You know, he was a little bit more careful. And with everyone, I think those days. But then gradually over the years, started to play with them. I remember when, you know, Geoff had this apartment in, where was that, Oz? What part of town was it?
95th Street in New York? Or
Yeah, like on the 7th floor. It's
yeah,
just
yeah, like a
one
walk up, like, and he carried his 10,000 records. I have no idea how
Well,
he did
actually,
that.
Osvaldo, if I could just correct you there, it was the fourth floor walk up, and he didn't carry his records
Oh, you
because
carried them?
he mistimed the movers, and he said, "Bear, can you meet me at 90?" I got to get out of here, and I got there, and there were 10,000 records that we then had to carry up the. I think that's the
room.
most physical activity I've ever had in one day.
It's
It
amazing.
was
So I
unbelievable. And he's like, "I'm sorry, I got to run, man. I got to run."
You go up to his room, and it was literally wall to wall with LPs that he'd, you know, put in wood bracings and so on, and nowhere, just barely enough room to sleep. I remember that, you know, up like a little loft bed and so on, and one chair, which was an old,
Tractor.
you know, tractor truck chair, right?
Yep,
Red,
yep,
mounted
yep.
on the floor, and an AM radio where you could listen to
Horse radio.
Blue Jays
Yep.
radio or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. What else do I remember? Corn on the cob. It was corn season, so there was nothing to eat except a bunch of corn. There. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and then Ozzy, I guess I remember the first time we really started connecting was at Spoleto during that filming of that great movie of mine.
Yes,
Yes, that's
yeah,
right. So
I think I had the best scene in a movie that Steve was
yeah,
directing.
we were kids back then, super juvenile, doing stuff that you see now on Instagram with pranks, getting somebody a white courtesy telephone to make up a name that sounds silly and, you know, laughing. We did that kind of stuff. And one of the things we like to do is like do parodies of movies on, you know, on my big old camera I brought, you know. And anyway, so lots of silliness, basically.
But Osvaldo, just a little bit more about Geoff Nuttall, who I think in your notes you said, in its original version, Ever Yours was the last piece I wrote for and dedicated to Geoff Nuttall, who was and still is my brother in music and life. And I want to ask you about that present tense, because I think it's so true that our relationships with people we've lost, with loved ones, continues after their death, and that it still builds and develops even though that person is no longer with us.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you about that relationship with Geoff through just what you talked about at the beginning about how you wrote this piece of music,
Yeah.
Ever Yours, and that you're still communicating with him through this piece.
yeah, I feel Geoff, from the time of Yiddishbbuk, which was the first time that I felt that my music was played in the way that I was hearing it in my head, and and I think it has to do with the Saint Lawrence, of course, but primarily because I think the musical landscape of Geoff is so wide. He got it. Normally, like up to that moment, my pieces were performed by really good musicians, but their frame of reference was classical music. And Geoff got it. Because he had the phrasing comes from the Jewish liturgy or whatever, or from folk music from the mountains in Eastern Europe. Anyways, your question is, how does the conversation continue? Well, during the years when Geoff was in the Planet, I would send him, like I now do with Steve, whatever I'm writing, not necessarily string music. And I knew that he was such an perceptive critic and editor. He would say, I don't know about this, or yeah, this is great. Even every yours, the first rehearsal, I brought completely different music, and he's like, oh, what happened to that idea you had with the Haydn? And I'm like, I don't know, I did something else. He says, maybe you should try that idea, not this one. And I love that. Even I don't know if, Barry, if you remember, even with Yiddishbbuk, I was writing as we were rehearsing, and I felt that I wanted to create a transition between two of the movements, and I wrote it. And they did it. And Geoff says, okay, if you want, we'll play it, but I think it's terrible. He says, what? I remember this was my first lesson with him, because he says, I don't know what it is with you composers. You feel that you need transitions. There is not need for a transition here. People will get it. And he was right, because, you go, I was very young then, or, I'm a late bloomer, so young for my standards. And in music school, they always teach you the art of transition. But then in real life, we watch movies, especially Stevens movies, which is, there is no transitions, and they are great, So Geoff had that bigger frame, and of course, even now, I think that all composers we are all the same, that we care about 3 or 4 people, what 3 or 4 people will think about what we are doing, right? I mean, and of course it's nice if more people like it, but mostly that by now this conversation with Geoff continues, because I knew where he would push me, so it continues after. Music is extraordinary, right? I mean, we take life, we put it on paper, so to speak, or into patterns, right, of rhythms and pitches and expressions, and an entire person we will all be gone, but something of us will continue, either through a score or a recording or a memory, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to listen to a section of this piece called Starbound. And this, we haven't even talked about the Van Gogh's letters and the passage that inspired you about this particular piece. But we hear the theme of Haydn's, the second movement of Opus 76, number 2. Is that right?
Yes.
In Starbound. Anything you want to say about this before we listen?
Yeah, basically, I stretched time in the Haydn, but very like what is an 8 note becomes 2 bars, so to speak. Really, really stretch it. So when you stretch it, then I imagine in my head, okay, so if you stretch it, actually you start hearing overtones and vibrations between the voices. So, for instance, if in the Haydn the accompaniment goes pam, what, when you stretch that, you will hear. It's like you see the stardust in between the tension in between the 2 notes. If they are at the third or at the fifth, or So I created all this stardust and something that in the Haydn is like a gem, like a jewel. In this, in Starbound becomes a real journey to the stars. It's inspired by what Van Gogh said about. He said, when I look at the stars in the sky, I get dreamy in the same way that I get dreamy when I look at the black dots on a map. The black dots that signify towns or villages. Why, I ask myself, should the shiny spots on the sky be less reachable to us than the black dots on the map? Just as we take a train to reach Juan or Tarascon, we can take death to reach a star. And Geoff was already dying when I wrote this piece. So I thought, yeah, why not? Why not? Especially for someone who lives so intensely and he's so alive. People that are very alive, they continue to live.
Absolutely. Let's listen to just a minute or so, a few minutes of Starbound. That's a section of Starbound, music by Osvaldo Golijov from the new album on Phenotypic Recordings. It's called Ever Yours. And I want to bring Barry Shiffman back into the conversation. And Barry, tell me about this. This is a sort of the source material in a way is Haydn String Quartet Opus 76 number 2, but reworked in a very, very different way. What does this what was the meaning of this particular work for the St. Lawrence Quartet and for you? And I also want you to talk a little bit about Osvaldo's writing for strings.
Yeah. So Sarah, just to be clear, I wasn't involved in the St. Lawrence Quartet when this piece was being written, right? I that was with Owen
Yes, yes,
Dalby,
yes.
right?
Yeah,
So
I understand.
I think I'll let that be answered maybe by Osvaldo. What I can tell you is that Geoff did speak to me about how excited he was that Osvaldo was writing, and I think it's Geoff knew what was happening to him. He knew he wasn't going to survive this cancer, and I think he did everything possible to harness the cancer and the experience of uh, what was happening to inspire others around him. And I think it's pretty clear he used his illness to inspire Ozzy to write a piece and kind of challenged him. You know, you're not going to you better write something because I'm not going to be here. I think
Yeah,
that was the implied message. I don't know if you ever said that to you right out, Osvaldo, but it was pretty clear that
yeah,
um, you
yeah,
better do
yeah,
it and do it quickly. And he was very excited about the piece. He kept talking to me, oh, got to bring us to Rockport and we'll play it there. We'll do it in Banff. And uh, he was really excited about sharing this new music. If you would
yeah,
speak to him, you wouldn't know he was ill. He was so singularly focused on, hey, this is great. We can't wait can't wait to have people hear it.
Yeah, I think it's during the last days of playing with the quartet and in playing like this piece with a guest quartet that he did a couple of times. Just I remember somehow he had this ability. I mean, not to make him superhuman or something, but
But he
it
was.
is important to. But in a certain way, he was. Yeah, I mean the idea that he has pancreatic cancer. He's feeling just horrible, and yet he has a recording session coming up for something he's something maybe unrelated to this project, but something he's really passionate about, like a hide and string quartet or something that he has to pull it together. And I saw him on the soundstage, so where they used Bing at Stanford, and to watch him lie down completely and just try to pull it together. And then once he's sitting in that chair, boom, almost as if he left his body, literally, that all the pain, the ache, the exhaustion, the nausea, everything is just gone for those moments. And he would sit in that chair. One session I remember was like 8 hours. So, I mean, with,
yeah.
of course, with breaks, but that's a real testament to his enthusiasm for all things life, consciousness, experience, and Osvaldo Golijov.
Osvaldo, tell me about the references to Van Gogh, Vincent van Gogh, and his brother Theo, and the letters back and forth,
Well,
and
yeah,
that ever yours. Yeah.
I think I think that it's okay. I feel I could speak for the three of us, for Stephen and Barry and me, and say, yeah, we were brothers. There is a brotherhood, right? And the love between Vincent and his brother is something to behold. Yeah, I mean, and also Vincent, I think he was completely uh, out of the norm, like Geoff was. So there is all those things coming to play, right? I mean, the way Vincent talks about the colors that he sees on a night walk along the shore. Nobody sees all these colors, and the same happened with Geoff, seeing like the possibilities of, oh no, we have to find something in between these two. I mean, people see, it's like Geoff's pixelation of seeing, of hearing, in terms of expression, emotion, and shape, was much more refined, I think, than that of most people. He saw more clearly, like more vividly, like Van Gogh said. He in that description of the walk, he mentions so many hues of blue That is crazy. It's like, how can he, he's, and for each one, I mean, the foam is like, is lapis lazuli, and the sea is cerulean, and the sky is like, I mean, he, I think that there is a correspondence there.
So this is a collection of several different works that you wrote, but they all go together in a kind of, you conceive of them all together? Yes?
Yeah, well, the
So-
instrumentation is similar, it's only strings,
Right.
and most of them were written, except for Kivakarat, most of all the other 8 of the 9 tracks were written in the last 3 years or 4 years. So it's the same guy at the same time in his life. So,
Oh.
yeah.
And who are the musicians on this album?
So we have Barry, who made his own arrangement of the Kivakarat, and that is really wonderful. I mean, even if it's not the first time that music originally for clarinet is done in the viola, I think that this piece has been so associated with the clarinet that I had not thought about viola. And Barry did an amazing arrangement. So we have that. We have him. We have 2 quartets that I met at a festival in Holland, the Arethusa and the Animato Quartets. And the young double bass player, Nicky Schwartz, who is originally from Boston, actually. So he's a neighbor. He grew up a few blocks from where, and I didn't ever meet him. He's much younger, and also he plays in the Concertgebouw orchestra. So those are the musicians, and to me, it was very, very powerful. And I think for Barry and for Steve too, like to see, wow, all these people who didn't know the St. Lawrence, didn't know Geoff, didn't know anything, but that's the miracle of music, right? I mean, music, they got it. They got it more than the notes, they got the spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just second that. I mean, that it was amazing to me to hear for the first time Barry get together with the Arethusa in those viola quintets, and then Kavakarat as well, which is it's a real viola concerto kind of piece of music that just singing at the top of his lungs. It was a really unique kind of blending, just kind of happened that you don't always see when people meet for the first time and play.
Right.
Let's listen to that. Listen to a little bit of it next. That's Kavakarat.
Okay.
And Barry, tell me about your arrangement.
So this piece originally, in its original conception, came out on the CD of Kronos called Night Prayers, and it was for Jewish cantorial voice and string quartet. So I remember hearing that when it came out. Then it became part of the larger work, Dreams and Prayers of Isaac the Blind, where it was played on clarinet. And I played that, I don't know, 100 times. We recorded it. So I feel like I internalized that solo line pretty well from having played it so much. And it's just
you
one
played
of those...
it with the quartet, right?
Yes, with the St. Lawrence Quartet, exactly.
As second violinist with, a clarinetist. So, yeah.
Right. So we did it with many different clarinetists, and we recorded with Todd Palmer. And sitting in the quartet and listening to that solo line, I was thinking, I always thought, it felt like I could feel it in my hand that it would just sit perfectly on the viola. When I left the quartet, I started playing more and more viola. And I just started fooling around with the part and realized that pretty much everything he'd written for the clarinet could fit on the viola. And what you could do on the viola that you couldn't do on the clarinet, I kind of tried to exploit in this recording, which is you could do glissandi, or portamento between notes, and in a different way than exists on clarinet. And so rather than trying to just play the clarinet part on the viola, try to turn it into something that is different and exploits all of the possibilities of that instrument. And was quite fun. And I will say I did get to play it once on the viola with the St. Lawrence Quartet when I brought them to my festival in Rockport. We were looking for somebody to play together,
Mhm.
and so we did that. And um, I know it had Jeff's blessing. Like he said, "Oh, that's a really good arrangement." So it was nice to be able to put it down on this recording for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like a Jimi Hendrix thing. You know, Barry does he has these crazy portamentos and leaves a lot of notes suspended in mid-air. Yeah. And it's very dramatic and beautiful and powerful. You know, I love Barry. You gave a whole new life to
I've been
this.
giving the music to different cellists as well now, and they're playing it on the cello. It sounds
Oh,
fantastic.
oh
Yeah.
wow, interesting.
Santiago Canon Valencia did a
Yeah.
fantastic
Oh,
performance
yeah.
of it on
Oh,
cello.
interesting. Wow.
Let's listen to a little bit of it. This is Kavakarat. That was Kavakarat, music by Osvaldo Golijov with soloist Barry Shiffman. Amazing that. So it started out as music for string quartet and cantor, and then string quartet and clarinet. And now you've arranged it for string quartet and viola.
All great works eventually find their way to the viola. Steve, we've talked about that.
No, it's amazing because it really is transformative. It's a completely different piece with each extra soloist.
Yeah, and my hope is
beautiful.
just that. Yeah, my hope is that violists pick it up and play it because there's a need for great repertoire. There's a need for great repertoire for viola with quartet. It's a fantastically versatile work to program. It can be, as it is in this collection of newer musicals as Osvaldo, it can be a companion piece in a program where you're playing a Mozart viola quintet and you want another work to join. So I think it could have quite a good reception from the violists that are looking for a powerful work, which this definitely is.
Osvaldo, this seems like an especially sort of deep album for you of looking back over so much of your career. Kavakarat is from 1993, is that right? You wrote it originally in 1993. And there are these works. You think of someone like Bach, who was always quoting himself and looking backwards and forwards, and it's so interesting that you're doing that in a way with this album, and you're also looking at Haydn and Vincent van Gogh and his brother Theo and friendship and memory, and so much is in this album. It's very profound. Yeah.
And the Tintype was also a really unique piece. I think it doesn't. I was trying to think what kind of mold does it really fit, but whether or not it's quartet with added viola, solo viola, or if it's more of a viola quintet chamber ensemble. But that was such a beautiful little, it's not as big, obviously, as every yours in different dimension, but it has so much to say that each movement of those had really a poignancy about it that just a pleasure to work on with Barry and the Arethusa.
It was a piece that kind of grew by itself because it was first I was going to just write a short theme for a documentary on Elie Wiesel, and I liked the theme, and I said, well, let's keep working, and three movements, it just happened.
Barry, did you premiere that, or how did that work out?
Yeah.
So Ozzy called and he said that he was working on this documentary film about Elie Wiesel, and he had a couple themes that he had written, and would it be possible for me to just quickly make a small demo recording with some of my students or colleagues? And I said, when Osvaldo calls and says he's got new music and will you play it, there's excitement. So I called some of my closest friends that were in Toronto. We met on a Sunday morning at the Royal Conservatory, and I brought in an engineer. We just literally printed the music, put it up on the stand, and started reading it. And we were reading, the first thing we read was the theme that became the second movement, right? The
Elie Dreams.
Yeah, the Elie Dreams. And we're reading this piece, and you can feel the hairs stand up on it's unbelievably beautiful. And everybody suddenly realized, oh, this is really great. And what I have to say I loved about Osvaldo is we sent him the music, we sent him the recording really quickly, and he's incredibly self-critical, but he also knows when he got something good. And he said, oh, this is good. This is really, really good. And I was so happy because it really was. And then it developed, and he reached out. I think I was in Rockport in the summer, and he came to see me there, and we had members of the Viano Quartet, and we were able to read through what had developed into a real 3-movement quintet with this incredible last movement homage to Philip Glass. And I mean, it's amazing to see where it came. And I'm glad that it didn't just live as incidental music to this film, but actually has filled another really interesting need in the repertoire, which is a wonderful 20-minute bona fide viola quintet, right? So
Yeah.
I think, again, people are excited about it.
Yeah, I love what the difference that a second viola gives. I mean, I totally understood why Mozart loved that formation so much. There is a magic in a density that was great. Yeah, it was great to explore those two, because like Stephen said, like the Che va Carat is kind of like a viola concerto. This is more this is more like a quintet, man, and it's incredible. It's a sonority that is so different than the quartet. Or the sextet, or the 2-cello quintet. I mean, it truly has. I don't know. I fell in love with that, the densities.
And the whole piece is named Tintype, right?
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
Well, because I think Elie Wiesel was trying to keep alive a world that had disappeared, and it reminded me of those old photographs, like daguerreotypes and all these techniques in the 19th century that then disappeared, right? Tintype was one of those techniques. I think that the negative was metal, right? Tin. So it's like, yeah, and to me the piece sounds like that, like a picture, like a photograph from the 19th century. A world that has vanished, like that book. There is a beautiful book of photographs by Roman Vishniak, and this piece has that kind of a world that disappeared kind of sonority.
Yeah. Let's listen to it. Elie Dreams from Tintype, Osvaldo Golijov. That was a little bit of Elie Dreams from Tintype, music by Osvaldo Golijov on the new album Ever Yours on the Phenotypic Recordings label. And it's so great to be talking to the three of you, Osvaldo Golijov, Barry Shiffman, and Stephen Prutsman. And Steve, you were producing these recording sessions, and maybe you can talk a little bit about what that was like and the process of working with these quartets. And
Sure.
yeah,
Well, had been, kind of talked about off and on with, Ozzy and I. One big theme, as you kind of got garnered here, is the theme of friendship, and I have a very unique friendship with Ozzy and with Barry, and then the three of us together, and then there's a couple other friends that we also, kind of gather with, and um, Ozzy, has been such a wonderful supporter of what I do in music, and also in my personal life, as a good friend. He's I think both Barry and Ozzy are the two of this rarity now in today's era, where I can call them up and they pick up. That old school kind of thing. You actually pick up the phone and say, I feel like talking to Ozzy or Barry. And so, as back when Phenotypic got started, little by little, Ozzy I'd pick his brain about this and that and so on. And then, thinking that, not really knowing how the recording, world works, not, would hope for someday to actually work with Osvaldo in this kind of capacity on a project of his, but when he brought it up, he said, if you're interested, I'd be interested, and that was fantastic. And that itself was a while ago. So it took a good long time for things to settle in and get the right people, and for the time period. In the meantime, Osvaldo had met Daniel Rawlings in the Arethusa out there, and really felt that was the quartet to work with, and to do it in Holland. But fast forward to I guess it was a year ago, last January, I was planned to go, and I had passport issues, so I had to turn around at Kennedy and go home. So that's another story. But we're able to do it easily remotely. So we'd just get up at 11 o'clock at night and get ready for the 1 a.m. to whenever session, and it was, I would say it's like 85% equivalent of actually being there live. It was pretty damn good.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that I think, just from a really personal standpoint, and I know we were getting a little cosmic here. Ozzy's okay with going a little cosmic, not too much, but a little bit, with the whole idea of a spirit living on beyond our physical existence in some ways, and by the way, the least of which is so obvious is every wave we make in music continues to go out into the ends of the universe. So Geoff's playing out there. When we one of the highlights of my personal life was playing all the Bach keyboard sonatas with Geoff, and a couple of times. And those experiences of recreating Bach with Geoff, that's out in Alpha Centauri land probably by now, but it's still living on. And the real gift, I have to say, of this project to me personally, it was the editing process, because that's when you really get to know the music, if you thought you did before. But that in and of itself, it was just like having a conversation with Ozzy or with Geoff, just hearing something new each time I'd listen to a different take and try to piece things together. It was very much a labor of love, something that I would look forward to every day, more than practicing the piano or anything else. Was just, again, diving into that pool of Ever Yours or Tintype, and just hear the conversation over again, but here's something new, and be delighted by that. I love the idea too that that in Ever Yours, that there are references to, like, Geoff on his motorcycle. That's kind of obvious alliteration-ish stuff going on. Geoff was very connected to nature, and but he was an amateur professional gardener, I guess we call it,
Yeah.
sense. And loved hiking, loved the great outdoors. Nothing better than to be, out camping in Alberta somewhere in wintertime, I guess. I don't know. Once that process was going, we spent a lot of time on the edits. Osvaldo suggested this mix and mastering pair in New York that had worked on the movie score of his recently. Around that time, and he loved the sound that they were getting, and so we used them. But then, like everything at Phenotypic, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, which ends up getting a really good product as a result. And so, all players had very much hands-on opinions about what to use, what not to use, and the sound itself. It's a very, I don't know how to describe the sound of those cats, Osvaldo, but it envelops. I mean,
Yeah.
we think of it. This is also recorded immersive, and so this idea that the sound just kind of flows through you, melts you, is comforting. And sometimes it's like these excitations in consciousness through sound that seem to happen each and every time I listen to those mixes. It's like um, that was such an amazing opportunity for me. Just really. And as I said, friendship is a big part of it. We can't really
Yeah.
tease apart at this point what's my love of Starbound all about, and my love for Osvaldo or Geoff or these performing opportunities with the St. Lawrence that I've had. It's just it's all kind of there's no clarity there, but it's all part of something bigger. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think that is how good things happen. Like I was struck that Mozart didn't call his clarinet quintet. He called it the Stadler quartet, right? Quintet, because Stadler was the clarinetist, right? I mean, the personal is much more important in all the good things, especially in chamber music, than what we think it is. It's yeah. I believe that I love this record, and I believe that a lot of the good things are because of the trust between people and the love between people and the friendships, and yeah.
So, we're going to listen to one more clip from Esperanza. And Osvaldo, you wrote this as the love theme for Coppola's film Megalopolis. Is that right?
Right, yeah.
And then did you write a version especially for this recording?
Yeah, because I was so excited with the week in Amsterdam. I would wake up super early and not know what to do with myself. How many coffees can you have? So before the session starts. So I said, let's do a version for string nonet of this love theme that I had just written the year before or whenever I wrote it. And I love the title. It is something that Francis says, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is esperanza, hope. And yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
I have to say that he it happened unexpectedly. I think it was Monday or something. After or Sunday after this, Ozzy called and he had jet lag, so he said, "I wrote this little piece. Do you think they could record it?" And so literally he wrote it in a hotel room, and then people laid it down the next day. So
yeah, it was
incredible.
well. It was all very very inspiring. The environment, to have Steve join. I mean, it was also very funny because there was such respect between the European musicians and Steve, and then in one of the takes, I think that Barry said, "Prutsman, shut up." So it was it's the difference between knowing someone for 30 years and knowing someone that week,
By the end of the session, we were all telling him to shut up, though. It was fun.
No, it was great. It was very beautiful.
That was Esperanza by Osvaldo Golijov. So beautiful. And I think this piece also shows how music connects us over the generations. And Barry, you were talking earlier about how when you first played Yiddishbbuk, and there were other quartets, there was Kronos in the audience, and there were other quartets, and how then other groups take on this music. And Steve, I know you've played pieces that then the next generation takes up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it's an extraordinary process. And then we lose friends and collaborators along the way, and younger musicians come along, and it's a beautiful, beautiful album. So thank you so much for talking today.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for listening to M Cubed from Phenotypic Recordings. co-founded by Michael Hostetler and Stephen Prutsman. The music you heard on today's show is available on Bandcamp and wherever music is streamed. There are links in the show notes. Today's program was produced by AJ Machado, and I'm your host, Sarah Cahill. Please follow or subscribe so you know whenever we post a new show. You can reach us at info@phenotypicrecordings.com, and we're always glad to hear from you.